What's up, all my plant lovers? Devin is here for another episode of Plant Vibrations TV. Plant Vibrations TV, how does that sound? Maybe one day? Maybe one day. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. That would be plants that the deer don't eat. So if you guys have been here for a while over the last couple of years, maybe you have noticed, I've been always talking about deer because, I used to live in Seattle, deer were no problem. Indiana, where I lived, deer weren't a problem. I moved here to eastern Pennsylvania, and the deer have just wreaked havoc on my garden, on my yard, on the plants that I wanted to plant. So a little backstory, my family and I, we own a company that sells plants across the country called Roberta's Gardens, and for that reason I get tons of plants for free, which is a blessing because I've had the opportunity to plant a bunch of different plants here at my garden, only to witness them get eaten to nothing. So I wanted to create this video to help gardeners that also struggle with deer make some informed decisions so that you don't have to go about, wasting all of your money on plants that are just going to get eaten by deer, but rather can select plants that maybe the deer find a little bit less palatable. So I've been shedding the tears watching my plants get eaten to then have the opportunity to share what I've learned. Thankfully, I do get these plants for free, but my time is clearly not free. Anyways, over these last couple years, figuring out what's been going on, there's a few things to recognize when it comes to deer. They're creatures of habit. If you have plants that they have eaten to nothing, and you plant some of the plants that I'm about to talk about that are typically less palatable to them, well, they are creatures of habit, and they will likely go for those plants that you have planted in those areas that have previously been eaten. However, maybe they'll find that they don't like the new plants that you've selected as much, and maybe they'll change their patterns. Who knows? That's kind of the hope. There's many different factors that go into whether or not the deer will eat your plants. The season, if it's snow on the ground and they really don't have anything else, yeah, they'll go for that laurel shrub that you typically wouldn't have any problem with. They will go for pretty much anything. That's why we like to say deer resistant or plants that are less palatable to deer, because in the extremities of not having any food available, they'll eat just about anything, which is a shame on many different levels, which you can understand. So, going through all this research, trying to understand what to plant, there's a few key factors that that you can really utilize to eliminate the deer. The best way to get rid of deer once and for all are fences, but that's like an 8 to 10 foot fence all around your property. That's number one, very expensive. Number two, here where I live, I can't even do that. I have to pass it through the township and it wouldn't get passed. So it's it's not even an option. You can do repellents, which I'm experimenting with tons of different repellents to see if any of them actually work on some of the plants that have gotten eaten in the past. So, those are expensive, timely. You got to remember to do it every 10 to 14 days, and that's a hassle. So during these last couple of years of experimenting with all of these different plants, I've been able to condense it into a few different factors about the plant life which the deer find less attractive, less palatable. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. So the first factor that you can think about, which is a shorter list, plants that are poisonous. I'm talking like monkshood or digitalis, foxgloves. Now these plants are poisonous, and because of that, the deer are smart enough not to eat them because they don't want to get sick. If you do find some plants that have some of those poisonous attributes, it's not doing any harm to the environment, it's not doing any harm to the ecosystem, but they're plants that the deer don't typically go for. So I will be planting a lot of digitalis. Deer just don't they don't want to get sick, and so that's a good thing. And I love digitalis. So another type of plant that the deer tend to stay away from are plants that have fragrant foliage. Some of the plants I've had success with, and I'll be planting more of, lavender. They don't like the fragrant foliage of a lavender. Hardy geranium. This is actually a 2-for-1 plant, which I'll get into here in a little bit, but this definitely has a, you know, the hardy geranium has a very kind of like almost earthy, minty fragrance about it, and they seem to not care about that. Another one would be lamium, which has a very kind of intense fragrance in its foliage as well. What else do I have? I have some monarda, some bee balm over here. Also very, very fragrant foliage. So plants that have fragrant foliage, deer typically tend to stay away from. I don't know why, they don't like that fragrant foliage. Some other ones that I've had success with, allium. They don't go for that oniony flavor. Shasta daisies. I always think of the fragrance of a Shasta daisy kind of like a baby's diaper. It's a really kind of gross fragrance, but they don't eat that either. I have a lot of ground cover thyme. They don't go for the fragrant thyme. Fritillarias, mint, which you got to be careful when you're planting mint, of course. Marigolds, a classic annual with very fragrant foliage. Oregano, rosemary, catmint, salvia, Russian sage, cleome. So if you're looking for plants that, if you have access to plants with that fragrant foliage, that's a little bit of a safer bet. You can think that the deer, you can, you know, have a little bit more assurance that the deer won't go for those. Other plants that the deer tend to stay away from are plants that have quite thick, leathery, or succulent foliage. Here I have some gardenia. This is winter hardy gardenia, hardy to zone 6. I'm in zone 6B, so I'll be planting this. Deer typically stay away from that thick, leathery foliage. My laurel plants up by my front door, deer do nibble on it a little bit if in the middle of the winter when there's not much else, but then, you know, by summertime they don't, spring, summer, fall, they don't touch it at all, and they really just nibble just a little bit. When I'm talking about succulent plants, I have tons of hardy ice plant. They really typically don't go for succulents. Lots of sempervivum, lots of hens and chicks around here. Other sedums, like ground cover sedums. Other plants that have really kind of like thick or kind of just, you know, a texture that you can imagine taking a bite out of is just not going to be very nice inside the mouth, like Pachysandra. They really don't go for that, which most of us know. Epimediums, which is a great ground cover plant for the shady gardens. Yucca, tons of grasses, sedges. I consider all of those kind of a thicker kind of foliage. Dusty Miller, Mahonia, which also has the spikies on its foliage. That's like a 2-for-1, thick and spiky. Hellebores. I have tons of iris over here. Waxy begonias, Virginia, pig squeak. So plants that have a really thick foliage, oftentimes the deer don't go for those either. So another category of plants that deer tend to stay away from are plants that have kind of like fuzzy foliage or prickly foliage or super fine foliage. I was saying earlier that geranium is a 2-for-1, hardy geranium 2-for-1 because it's fragrant and it's kind of fuzzy. Must just not be very nice on the tongues of a deer. I don't know. Ferns, you know, a lot of ferns kind of have like fuzzier foliage. Deer really stay away from ferns. Plants like yarrow, papaver, the poppies, dill, amsonia, those are really nice kind of finely textured foliage, and for some reason the deer tend to stay away from them. Zinnias, that has a pretty like fuzzy foliage. You know, plants, I've also found, you know, working with so many different plants, when I'm out cleaning those plants, if they leave like irritations on my skin, probably the deer aren't going to go for those plants. Those are often the fuzzy foliage plants. Heathers, calunas, acanthus, beer's breeches, all these different plants that have kind of like a fuzzy texture about their foliage. Maybe it's on the underside, maybe it's on the top, or kind of like prickly areas or very fine foliage. Those plants deer tend to stay away from. And then the last category is my random category. Plants that just for some reason I've witnessed do well, and other gardeners have noticed that they do really well also. Plants like daffodils, lilac, Rudbeckia. I guess Rudbeckia kind of has some fuzzy foliage along with Echinacea. Those are kind of similar. Cucumbers, anemone, peony. I don't know why, but thankfully they don't eat the peonies. Another plant I wanted to mention was the milkweed. I have a lot of this to plant. Milkweed has kind of like a milky sap when you break the foliage, break off the stems. For some reason, you know, maybe it's bitter for the deer, but they stay away from those as well. Columbines. So kind of with those 3/4 categories of foliage to look for when you're looking to add plants to your garden that are going to be less palatable to the deer, those are some good starting points. You know, like I was saying, no plants are going to be totally deer proof, but there are plants that deer prefer less than others. You know, we shouldn't. For a while, I was just so depressed, thinking, oh my gosh, I can't grow anything here. The deer just eat it all. But I'm not going to give up, and you shouldn't give up on having a garden because deer eat plants in your garden either. Real quick to mention some of the plants that they have absolutely decimated in my garden. Hydrangeas, every single day it's like they eat my hydrangeas. Daylilies, roses, let's see, what else did I have written down here? Hostas, strawberries, lilies, pelargoniums. I had a juniper. It's like a $200 juniper tree I planted. After 2 weeks, totally eaten up, rubbed up, totally worthless. Viburnum, I planted, spent lots of money on viburnum that have gone to the wayside. Tulips, if I didn't mention that. My hibiscus, my hardy hibiscus, no such luck. Petunias, pansies, those are all plants that I probably am going to stay away from for a while. But anyways, hopefully this gives you guys some hope that there are plants that you can use that the deer tend to stay away from. So if you have more questions, please leave a comment below. If you have other suggestions, other plants that you've found that deer don't eat in your garden, let me know. You know, this list is not exhaustive by any means. It's just my experience and some of the things that I've learned gardening here in Eastern Pennsylvania over the last couple of years. But anyways, thank you guys for joining me here on another episode of Plant Vibes TV. I will catch you guys soon. Ciao.